Welcome, everybody, to I'm Dr. Richard Walker. I'm coming to you from Spokane, Washington. It is the 1st of October, and this is my monthly not-so-deep dive into redox. Don't be frightened by that. We will cover some science here that you may not fully understand, but I think afterwards you'll have a pretty good idea of how redox works. We'll spend about an hour doing this, and you will be able to share this with your teams if people are looking for a scientific explanation of how redox works. So let's get started. We're going to talk about the science of redox and this technology that Asea has developed. We're going to first take a brief look at how redox biology works in your body, how the science has evolved and expanded, and we'll include documentation of that. And then we'll take a look in the latter part of this webinar. We'll take a look at how Asea ties into all of this so that you'll have a good understanding when somebody asks you, well, how does this work? Just a little bit about me. I've been a physician for a number of years. I'm retired from active practice, but I practiced for close to 40 years. I've been an entrepreneur and an educator, a spouse, a father, a grandfather, actually. And I used to climb mountains all over the world, including places like Mount Everest. And I also serve on the medical advisory board for Asea. If you want more information than what you're getting this morning, here are some sources that you can use. You may want to take a screenshot or a photo on your phone of these resources. If you're looking for just more information on the science of redox, PubMed is a great resource. That's the National Institute of Health's website, where there are literally thousands of references regarding redox. If you want science that is specific to Asea science, then you go to www.aseascience.com. If you want some experiential documentation and explanation, then you've got two places you can go to, redoxexperiences.com and Real Redox Results, or you can go to the various Facebook sites where people are reporting their wonderful experiences with this product. And if you really want more information, I don't think you need it, but if you really want a deeper understanding of what I'm talking about this morning, Dr. Lee Osler's book is a great place to go. You can get that on redoxmatters.com. I do want to let you know that you do not need to know all of what we're talking about this morning in order to use or recommend Asea. If you're a health professional and you're just interested in how things work, then this is a good place for you to be this morning. If you just want to know, does it work, then you can short circuit this, and I can just tell you that it does. It works very effectively. It's a tool that your body can use to regain and to augment its health. This is where it all happens in Pleasant Grove, Utah. I just came back from there a day or two ago. I was down there for a fly-in and just kind of refreshed my my batteries on all things Asea. Talked to the people down there, and it's just a wonderful company to work with. But why is redox so important? Well, ask yourself, why do you eat food? Why do you drink water? Why do you breathe oxygen? Why do you need redox signaling molecules? Because they're all really essential to life and health. The only difference is the first three you have to get outside of your body. You have to consume those. The body can take those ingredients and through some really cool machinations of biochemistry make redox signaling molecules, but many times your body is deficient or has imbalances and can benefit from replenishing an outside source of redox signaling molecules, and that's what's in Asea. We'll pay a little bit of special attention to oxygen because it's an important part of this whole equation, and redox signaling molecules and oxygen are closely tied together in the mitochondria, and we will discuss that. Redox is all about electrons moving around from one molecule to another, and oxygen, as it turns out, is a very good acceptor of electrons to empower all of this biochemistry. So we're going to hop in and start talking about redox. You know, without being able to unleash the energy stored in the food we eat, our cells would not exist. And the redox signaling molecules are an absolute requirement for the healthy function of this process. Cellular dysfunction, of course, is the root cause of all the illnesses. And if you can correct what's going on in your cells, then you can go a long way towards correcting health problems. And I like to tell people, if you have a symptom, if something's not working in your body and you're feeling off in whatever area, it means either you've got cells that are not doing what they're supposed to do, or you've got a group of cells somewhere that's doing something it wasn't intended to do. So if you can give the body a tool that it can use to fix those situations, you can imagine how beneficial that would be. Redox intervention, of course, like many things, works the absolute best as a preventive. But even if your body has gotten to the point where it has problems, the body has some wonderful mechanisms for regaining function and for repairing cells. And it is your body that does that. These redox molecules simply provide an extra supply of these molecules so that your body can do a better job of that. These molecules don't, in and of themselves, cure, heal, or treat any health problem. And redox homeostasis and redox signaling balance are essential to maximizing your cellular health. I do want to make sure that we get our standard disclaimer in here, and that is Asea Redox is not a pharmaceutical. Nothing that I say in this presentation should be intended to imply that Asea Redox signaling molecules cure, heal, or treat any disease or condition. Asea simply supplies an additional source of redox molecules that cells can utilize to supplement and enhance the action of the normally occurring molecules that are manufactured in every single one of your cells. What is life? You probably haven't contemplated that recently, but it's really nothing more or less than a continuous and very complex series of molecular interactions. Molecules vibrating, gyrating, bumping. If you could look at them in an electron microscope, they seem random and haphazard, like a chemical mosh pit. But they're ruled by certain elements. Certainly they're ruled by a genetic code, but how do we access the genetic code? Redox signaling molecules are important there, and we'll talk about that. They're governed by natural laws of molecular chemistry and physics. Redox, essentially, the gaining and losing of electrons. Could it be that simple? Yes, but that's a complex process. How well your health goes depends on redox signaling molecules to bring all of that chaos to order. What brings that to order, as you're going to find out, is largely an abundant supply of redox signaling molecules. To understand this, you got to think small. You got to think of atoms, molecules, electrons, and moving around in your cells. The human body is made of all of these atoms that make up molecules, and we have to start to think of molecules maybe in a different way. I think mostly we've thought of them as building blocks, but they're also the chemistry that provides function, creating energy in the form of ATP and enabling life. No energy, no life. Molecules in information processing, and that's where these redox signaling molecules come in. Molecules for communication inside and between cells. Molecules as the foundation for healthy cells. It doesn't get more important than that. All this biochemistry without some effective coordination and control would simply go nowhere. It certainly wouldn't provide life as we know it. So what's the answer? The answer is in a robust information communication coordination process, allowing cellular adaptation, because our cells are adapting all the time to changing circumstances, both in the environment and within the cell. This process is called hormesis, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But redox communication, being redox signaling molecules, RSMs, is really the key to keeping us alive and healthy at the cellular level, which is where everything actually happens. And it goes on instantaneously without us having any conscious awareness of it or having to have any conscious control. So what is it? Well, redox signaling, by definition, is a scientifically documented mechanism of cellular communication, essential to the functions of physiology and health. They're key to coordinating this huge range of biochemical and physiologic processes, both in and between our cells, and using redox signaling molecules to sustain order and the adaptive hormetic response necessary for health and wellness is really what this is all about. The molecular condition in your cells are constantly changing and leading to fluctuating levels of what we call oxidative stress. You might think of that as cellular inflammation. This requires an ongoing adaptation and modulation, the term we call hormesis, and this is a very important process to understand as the basis of cellular health. How do our cells get energy? Well, I'll just cover that really briefly. This is probably a whole semester course in biochemistry, but essentially how life works on our planet is that the sun is the ultimate supplier of energy, and plants capture that through the process of photosynthesis, which is a redox process, and they store it in the form of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And then we consume those nutrition molecules, and those molecules find their way to our cell. They find their way into our mitochondria, and within the mitochondria is where those fuels, as you might say, are turned into the ATP energy that runs our cells, vital to cell functioning. Here's a little bit more of a close-up view where you have fuels to create energy, fuels in the form of glucose, fatty acids, which is just fats, and amino acids, which are proteins. All undergo the function of oxidation reduction through a series of reactions in what's called the Krebs cycle to produce energy. Let's take a quick look at the Krebs cycle, and I don't want you to freak out when you see this because there's a lot of stuff going on here. But again, I'll remind you that you do not have to understand all of this. What's important for you to understand is that it's there, that we know exactly where redox molecules fit into this complex equations that occur in our mitochondria to produce energy. And it's important to redox signaling because the redox signaling molecules that we are going to talk more about are actually produced in the mitochondria within the Krebs cycle. And that's what's going on over on the series of equations over on the right-hand side. And that's simply a cascade where electrons are moving from one molecule to another molecule to another molecule. Each time they move, energy is released. And at the very end of that, and you can see that oxygen is very important as an electron acceptor. And that's why oxygen is so important. We need a continuous supply of oxygen to accept these electrons at the end of this transport chain. But not all of the oxygen is used up in that way, and some of it ends up in what we call reactive oxygen species. All of this complex biochemistry in the Krebs cycle is largely dependent on redox signaling to work properly. And definitely you want this to work properly if you want to stay alive and healthy. But these reactive oxygen species that are produced this way in the cells are essentially what we call redox signaling molecules, or at least some of them are. And that's the same as what you find in this blue bottle when you consume Asea. So redox reactions are essentially oxidation and reduction paired between a group of molecules. And they involve the transfer of electrons. Oxidation is just the term that science uses for the loss of an electron, and reduction is the term used for the gain in an electron. And when we have that discussion around what we call cellular respiration, which is the process of taking food and creating energy, utilizing oxygen in the mitochondria that we already looked at, the byproducts of that process are carbon dioxide, water, and energy, but also reactive oxygen species, which serve as signaling molecules. The reactive oxygen species that serve as redox signaling molecules, and they provide a regulatory function and mediators in the cell communication process, in addition to playing a role in maintaining redox homeostasis. Now, at this point, you may be a bit confused, but I don't want you to worry too much about that. I just want you to understand that there are people way smarter than I am, that understand this at a level even much deeper than I do. But this is how our cells work. And we have a product here, as you'll see, that works in harmony with this process to facilitate better cellular communication. So reactive oxygen species have gotten a bad rap. You go back into the 70s and 80s when the cellular health discussion was all about antioxidants, and reactive oxygen species were felt to be harmful. Well, new research certainly has counteracted that. Here's an article from PubMed that talks about reactive oxygen species, homeostasis, redox signaling, and cellular signaling. I'm not going to read the finding in the abstract. What it talks about is how important these molecules are to cellular health because of their role in cellular communication. So about now, you may say, well, gee, Dr. Walker, what's a redox signaling molecule? Well, the top group of molecules on this slide are all redox signaling molecules. There are more than this, but this is just a good example of some of the perhaps more important and plentiful redox molecules that our cells produce in order to maintain balance and communication. Here's an article on the overview of mechanisms of redox signaling. Now, in case somebody is wondering if there's much science behind this, take a look down in the lower left-hand corner of this slide. You'll see previous results, 19 of 34,427 references. What that means is this is just number 19 in a database of close to 35,000 articles that have to do with the role of reactive oxygen species and redox signaling molecules in cellular health. Redox homeostasis, the golden mean of healthy living. What could be more important than that? This information is out there for anyone who wants to search through PubMed and find it. So healthy cells, healthy body. It's that simple. Redox is an essential principle at work at every level of what I call the health pyramid. We must pay particular attention to the foundations. Epigenetics is where the environment of the cell interacts with our genes. This is an important part of hormesis. Interacts with our DNA and directs genetic expression that is necessary for survival and for good health. We'll see later that redox sensitive reactions play major roles at every level of what I call the health pyramid. So genes give life-saving instructions to our cells. That's such an important concept. And cells carry out those instructions to keep you alive and healthy. That's what we call genetic expression. And that genetic expression requires a healthy redox environment and an effective redox signaling mechanisms. Transcription factors are essential for gene expression, and they're controlled by redox. With age, cell communication breaks down, signals weaken, gene expression is disrupted when epigenetic pathways are affected adversely. Maintaining redox balance helps to ensure the integrity of the redox cellular communication. It needs to be accurate, it needs to be instantaneous in order for you to be healthy. Genes may not determine your destiny, but epigenetic control of genetic expression certainly does to a large degree. Epigenetics, which 10, 15 years ago we knew very little about, determines which programs are needed to respond to changing conditions in your cells in order to facilitate adaptation, hormesis, survival, lifespan. All of these things are dependent on this hormetic process and cellular communication to make sure that everything is done when it needs to be done, and that the right information is at the cell's disposal in the right place at the right time for our cells to act on it. So let's switch here. We've been talking about redox in general and how important it is to our cellular health. And it is vital. And it is something that, as a health professional, if you're listening to this, just understand that it is the basic foundation for health at the cellular level. And that's really important for our overall health. So now we're going to switch and talk about the stuff that's in this blue bottle, these redox signaling molecules that make up the redox signaling liquid solution, whatever you want to call it, in that bottle. But what is Asea? This is a definition. You might want to take a screenshot of this if somebody says, well, what is Asea Redox? Well, it's a proprietary and patented combination of redox signaling molecules. It doesn't contain every type of redox signaling molecules. It's a proprietary patented combination that Asea has determined to be most effective at improving cell signaling in a reactive state. And that's important because these molecules can either be active or not. And if they're not reactive or active, they're not going to do you much good. And formulated specifically to optimize the physiologic signaling effects of redox molecules on cell interactions. A lot of concepts in there, but it's a good definition. You could also say it's a biotech product protected by both patents and trade secrets, designed to replenish bioidentical redox signaling molecules safely and effectively. That's a lot shorter. And, I don't know, you can have both of those definitions inside your brain. And when you're talking to somebody, if somebody asks you, well, what is Asea Redox? Some combination of that should provide an answer. But that's what's in the blue bottle. Don't ever think that this is just modified salt water, because it isn't. Salt water happens to be the ingredient that it's made from, but what's in that blue bottle bears very little resemblance to salt water. It is a balanced, stabilized, biologically active mixture of redox signaling molecules. How do we define health? How do you define health? Well, in medical terms, it's pretty much just the absence of disease. But it may mean much more than that. In fact, I think it means a heck of a lot more than that. It's not, Western medicine is largely about symptom control, using focused medications or procedures to hone in on one particular aspect of health, very narrowly defined and directed. It's more about early detection, risk factor management, and treatment, spending lots of time on diagnosis, oftentimes much more money on diagnosis to find out specifically where the problem is. Interestingly enough, we don't have to know where the problem is when we're recommending Asea, because our body knows where it is and it knows how to fix it as long as it has the right ingredients. Metabolic health is the absence of disease at the foundation of cellular function. At the level of the mitochondria, metabolic dysfunction is the root cause of all chronic disease. Preventing and addressing and reversing metabolic mitochondrial dysfunction is really the holy grail of true metabolic and cellular health. And we're at the forefront of that. When someone has symptoms, like I said, they either have cells that are not doing what they're supposed to, or doing something that they're not intended to do. And that's all about information processing and communication. Repairing or eliminating those damaged cells and replacing them with fully functional cells is really the holy grail of cellular and metabolic health. So let's get into this discussion of hormesis. Think of oxidative stress as a fire inside your cells, as inflammation, a fire. It's an imbalance of the ability of our cells to manage oxidative stress. The potential for inflammation is present all of the time. So what happens? You've got a cell that is in oxidative balance. Everything is fine. Everything is working just fine. No problem. And then your cell gets out of balance with regards to antioxidants, and oxidants. And now you've got oxidative stress. A signal gets sent out into the cell, and that signal is done through redox signaling molecules that something is wrong. There needs to be a response. The fire has begun. And the earlier that message gets sent, the smaller the problem is when the fire truck arrives. Detecting this problem, initiating the response, calling 911, and then getting the fire truck started and the firemen on the truck and headed to the fire. Those are all functions of redox signaling molecules. And there are a multitude of what I call redox sensitive switches within the biochemistry and physiology of your cells that direct this kind of response. We can look at it diagrammatically as a signal event, a problem, and then that signal gets sent via redox signaling molecules and other things that a problem was detected. That problem gets communicated, and then a solution is formulated and affected, and the problem gets taken care of. Let's use a car, for example. Let's say the car is running low on oil. The problem, low oil. The detection is your oil pressure gauge goes down or the light goes on to tell you that there's a problem. The solution is to add more oil. At least that's oftentimes the simplest solution. And so we do that through a series of electronic switches and sensors in our automobile. Our cell does this kind of thing automatically without you ever knowing, and it does it untold number of times throughout the day for various problems that can evolve and cause problems in the cell if not addressed quickly. Facilitating adaptation is in a constantly changing cellular environment is vitally dependent on a healthy redox signaling process. There's no single example of a redox-dependent regulatory circuit essential to life and health. There are millions of these cycles and circuits going on in your cells all the time. But let's just take a look at one of the best understood and foundational examples. Let's look at redox control of energy production in your cells, without which we don't function. So the problem might be that you're fasting, or the problem might be that you're starving because there is no food. But what that results in is a threat to the energy production in your cells. And your cells sense that early on. How do they alert you to that? Well, you feel hunger. And that is the early warning sign that your cells are running out of energy. That process doesn't always work 100%, but let's look at this model and go on with this. Those redox signals get sent, and that causes the production of what we call transcription factors, and we'll look at those in a minute. And that creates some epigenetic changes, and eventually your body starts to burn the energy that we have stored in our fat. So food supply is threatened, we get hungry, that gets communicated at the cellular level, and our cells start to switch over from looking for carbohydrates to burn to burning fat that's stored throughout our body. That's a hormetic cycle, and it's very dependent on redox signaling and communication. Hormesis, stress, adaptation, stress, adaptation, stress, adaptation. It's the story of cellular health. It's an adaptive response of biological systems to moderate environmental or self-imposed changes like dieting or stress in order to improve functionality or tolerance to more severe changes. Example, starving, fasting. The adaptation is to switch fuels from carbs to fats and proteins because we've got plenty of energy stored in our body in the form of fat. We create fatty acids and ketones to fuel our cells. Most importantly, in our brain and our muscles, they can burn fatty acids and ketones like they can burn glucose, but it takes that adaptive response to push the cells in that direction. Redox sensitive switches make this adaptation possible, and we call this nutritional ketosis. This improves your metabolic flexibility. In fact, as your cells get better and better at this, they're more easily switching from one source of fuel to another. Sometimes that switch gets rusty if you never exercise it, let's say. And adapting to bioenergetics and metabolic changes can enhance things like athletic performance. Supplementing with Asea Redox, you'll see, facilitates this adaptation without ever having to deplete your stored carbohydrates. So essentially, you can push your body towards this fat burning cycle. We'll talk some more about that. Look at this list. Science tells that there are many benefits for achieving the metabolic state of nutritional ketosis, something that occurs naturally when you sleep because you stop eating at some point in time in the afternoon or evening, and your body then switches over naturally to burning fats. The brain appears to be particularly well adapted to running on the fuel that we get from burning fats. The Torre genetic study that we did, and I'll refer to that more in a little bit, indicated a positive influence of redox signaling molecules on what we call brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's a transcription factor which benefits the brain and is increased during this metabolic ketosis. It's intriguing that research has identified abnormalities, and I want to emphasize this, has identified abnormalities in redox-sensitive metabolic pathways in people's brains more than 10 years prior to the onset of dementia. We're talking about serious stuff here, folks. And we know that your diet is important in connection with redox. Lifestyle is important in connection with redox. Here's a list on this slide of the benefits of nutritional ketosis, which your body achieves every night when you're not eating because you go into nutritional ketosis. And this is all involved with redox signaling as an important part of that equation. Wellness, anti-aging, improvements in metabolic disorders, improvements in neurodegenerative disorders. We just talked about changes that occur 10 years prior to the onset of dementia. Excessive weight gain. We have a problem with obesity in this country. 2/3 of Americans are either overweight or obese. It also improves athletic performance. Asea actually has a massive impact on athletes, and Asea did a study a number of years ago that showed that, and I would ask, are there any athletes watching this presentation? Because anyone in the room who's had problems managing your body weight or is looking to improve their athletic performance should take a close look at the Asea Redox supplement. The energy released by redox allows athletes to achieve their dreams of peak performance. It helps them to burn fat. It helps them to go that extra mile. It helps in their hormetic response to exertion, exercise, and caloric needs. You can see the benefits that were achieved in that study that was done a number of years ago on long-distance bicyclists. There were shifts in 43 metabolites, mobilizing the free fatty acids, a 30% increase in the sparing of muscle glycogen, a 29% increase in endurance in mice. And that was a study that was published many years ago. The most surprising aspect of this study was not the enhanced metabolic shift into nutritional ketosis brought about by or facilitated by Asea Redox, but this change happened before these athletes even exerted. And that was the first inkling that we had, that redox signaling molecules were able to bring about these beneficial changes that facilitate and improve athletic performance without the athletic performance. Importance of redox transcription factors. Now we're going to talk about redox and epigenetics. What are transcription factors? They are molecules that, when activated, signal and control genetic transcription. Because if you don't transcribe your genes and bring that information into your cell, it's just good information sitting in the library, so to speak. But these transcription factors control the expression by binding to specific DNA sequences or regions, enabling access to those genetic instructions. It's like your library card. You can't take a card out of the library, or you can't take a book out of the library without a card. You can't get the information out of your nucleus and your genes without these transcription factors. There are many, many transcription factors. Some of the most important ones that we understand and have been seen to be related to redox are brain-derived neurotrophic factor, interferon A and B, NF-kappa B, and NRF2. And we'll talk a little bit more about those two because they're intimately involved in redox homeostasis and antioxidant production. These factors act to bring about the adaptive changes that are required to regain homeostasis. They essentially are vital to the hormetic process of stress adaptation. Without this, you don't adapt. The stress just gets worse and your body suffers. So let's look at two very important transcription factors. We're going to look at NF-kappa B and NRF2. Again, we may be getting a little deep for some of you. What I want you to understand is these are important factors that determine the health of your cells, and they are significantly influenced by redox signaling molecules, and more specifically by Asea redox signaling molecules. Remember, we don't cure, heal, or treat any disease. What we do is give your cells a very important tool to correct certain problems. But adapting to oxidative stress, which is an excess of reactive oxygen species and not enough antioxidants. Now, there's a little bit of a paradox here because reactive oxygen species serve as signaling molecules, but if you have too many of them in the wrong place, then they cause oxidative stress. Don't get tripped up by that. They are signaling molecules, but in excess, they can cause problems. So adapting to that stress is important to adapting to that stress are the roles of NF-kappa B and NRF2. They're very important transcription factors functioning in the protect area of what redox does. You know, if you want a short version of why are redox signaling molecules important, it's because they help in protecting the cells, they help in early detection of problems, they then facilitate the solution, and then they bring about the orchestration of that solution. But in the protect function, which is very important, these two transcription factors are very important. Both of them can bring about an increase in intracellular antioxidant production, glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase, which is important to putting out the fire of oxidative stress. But NF-kappa B is activated only after there's an increase in an excess of oxidative stress. So the problem has to occur, and then NF-kappa B gets released, and the cell then reacts to that and makes more antioxidants to correct the problem. NRF2, however, is activated through redox signaling molecules to bring about the increase in antioxidants without having to go through a burst of oxidative stress. It's all about early detection at the cellular level and then early intervention to bring about that hormetic homeostatic response. This illustrates how a cell undergoing oxidative stress responds in order to reestablish redox homeostasis. The cell responds by increasing antioxidant production using one of these two transcription factors. The choice is influenced by the degree of oxidative stress present, and this process is under the control of redox signaling molecules. You can see here that if there's an excess production of reactive oxygen species, that causes the redox signaling molecules, if they're present in abundance, to stimulate the NRF2 transcription factor, which ultimately then causes an increase in antioxidant production. If you're deficient in redox signaling molecules, then your cell has to undergo a degree of oxidative stress significant enough to then activate the kappa B transcription factor. You don't want to have to get there. It's much healthier for your cells to react early through the mechanisms of redox signaling to produce those antioxidants early on in the equation. Here's a concept of your redox rheostat. Over on the left-hand side, you've got low levels of oxidative stress, which stimulate NRF2. Over on the right-hand side, you've got high levels of oxidative stress that now influence antioxidant production through the NF-kappa B. You are much better off to stay over on the left-hand side of this rheostat. It's a sliding scale, and the oxidative state determines the response. And obviously, the preferable response is to work through NRF2. You can put this in terms of the hormetic cycle. There's a problem, oxidation. There's a detection, and NRF2 is activated to modulate that. That causes genes to go out into the cell and do certain things in order to increase antioxidant production. The oxidative stress is neutralized, and the cell is happy, and there's been no injury to the cell. Now, what's interesting here, and I think you'll find this quite interesting, is that NRF2 can be activated by things like exercise, bioenergetic oxidative therapy. We'll show you some examples of that, and oxidant supplements or antioxidant supplements. However, the consumption of antioxidant supplements do not do anywhere near, you don't get anywhere near the benefit by consuming antioxidant supplements than you do by increasing your cell's own production of those antioxidants through the role of redox signaling molecules' effect on NRF2. I'll repeat that. You can take a whole bunch of antioxidant, plant-based antioxidants, and they will help somewhat, but you're much better off to gently nudge your cells towards producing inside of those cells their own antioxidants, which are much more effective at neutralizing that stress, simply by getting your cells healthy with regards to redox signaling molecules. Supplementing with redox signaling and various biooxidative enhancements of the mitochondrial function, such as diet and exercise, both create the right sort of signaling through the right transcription factors. So lifestyle is important. Redox signaling molecules directly activate the NRF2, bringing about the increase in antioxidants necessary to put out the fire of oxidative stress, which you should think of as cellular inflammation. So, like I said, all of these interactions cause mitochondrial upregulation and enhanced oxidative defenses. Pulse electromagnetic fields, cold laser, photomodulation, vitamin D, acupuncture, hyperbaric oxygen, nitric oxide, fasting, redox signaling molecule supplementation works through the same mechanisms, but in my mind is a lot easier way to bring about these beneficial changes at the cellular level, simply by providing your body with some extra redox signaling molecules in an active form. Here's an article that speaks directly to that. This article was just recently published. I'll thank Lee Osler for sending it to me, I think yesterday. And what's happened here, this article is a 20-page article, and it's all about identifying a problem with NRF2 production as the cause of what we call neuropathic pain and injury to the facial nerve. This is a very severe problem. It's called the suicide disease because the pain that one gets in their face when they have this problem is so severe that people have committed suicide to get away from it. But what they identified was if you could biomodulate the cells and cause an increase in NRF2 antioxidant production stimulation, that could benefit these folks that have this issue. The conclusion of this abstract was that they needed to look or develop drugs that could accomplish this process. I think after seeing how redox works and how Asea Redox works, that maybe they need to be looking for what's in that blue bottle. Again, I'm not claiming that we could cure, heal, or treat this condition, but I think in many patients with chronic pain, we've seen them be able to, in some cases, address that problem by improving their redox signaling. So I'm going to switch gears here and talk about a study that Asea did. It's their Torrey Labs genetic signaling study. And this study came about, every experiment that you do starts with a hypothesis. And the hypothesis here was the questions that they were designed to answer was, could consuming the Asea Redox supplement have epigenetic effects on cells that might explain some of the results that we've observed over the years? And if so, would it be possible to identify certain patterns of epigenetic influence attributable to supplementing with Asea Redox, and how long would those changes last? So those are the questions that this study was designed to look at, and it was based on information about cellular redox. That we knew that cellular redox had an effect on epigenetics because the literature told us. Here's an article, cellular redox, epigenetics, and disease. Here's another one, redox, regulation of genome stability. Redox basis for epigenetic modifications. And so we knew that epigenetics plays a role here. What we didn't know was, would consuming 8 ounces of redox a day in a group of individuals, average age 34, would it change that epigenetic signaling pathways? Would it have an effect? And what we found was it did, and I'll show you those results in a minute. But it was really the first study that really showed that Asea could have an effect on the NRF2 transcription factor. We found that there were 5 areas of epigenetic expression that did have influence on certain very important and very prevalent aspects of disease, and that was autoimmune problems and immune dysfunction and deficiency, inflammatory conditions, connective, cardiovascular disease, digestive disorders, and hormone balance disorders. These were the areas where we saw the most benefit to a change in epigenetic genetic expression through supplementation with the Asea Redox. We did find that the beneficial changes that occurred in this study pretty much were gone after about 4 weeks. And that's why we need to continue to supplement with the Asea Redox to continue to have the benefits oftentimes that we see when we consume Asea. So let's look at just one of these genes. These were the 5 genes that were most affected by consuming 8 ounces of Asea a day. So let's look at the EGR1 gene and see what specific pathways were augmented and improved when the body had an adequate amount of redox signaling. There's some really important ones here. It's hard to see unfortunately, I can't read these slides on my screen. They're kind of small, but some of the most important ones were an improvement in NRF2, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and other transcription factors. That's a major, major finding. There was a pathway that influenced there were pathways that influenced many aspects of our health. There were some on insulin sensitivity, you name it. This study was really a very important one in pointing out that Asea's, one of the main modes of action for Asea is to enhance certain epigenetic signaling pathways. So lifestyle choices can have significant consequences for the redox continuum. We've looked at some of these today and why redox is important. And we've also shown that you can essentially biohack these benefits by drinking Asea Redox. I'm not recommending that you become a couch potato and sit there slugging down the Asea Redox. What I'm saying is that Asea Redox can enhance many of the things that we already know are beneficial to our health. So let me come back to the question of why redox is important. Redox signaling molecules are an absolute requirement for healthy functional cells of all types. it's a no-brainer that you want healthy, functional cells at all levels. Cellular dysfunction is the root cause of all illness. Why put your cells at risk for that? Redox interventions work best when they're used preventatively, but they still work very well even if your body has already developed some significant health issues. Redox signaling is essential to maximizing your cellular health, and redox powers the potential for enhancing our lives in multiple ways. Let's look, we got a little more time here, so let's look at cellular aging. Cellular aging is the most common risk factor for all chronic disease. And we're talking about living healthier, not just living longer, but extending what I call health span, so that as long as we are going to live, we should try to be as healthy as we can during that. And certainly, we're finding that having a healthy redox signaling environment in your cells can really have a benefit here. And we also know that our natural cellular production of redox signaling molecules declines with age, starting way back in our 30s and 40s. Here's a graphic display of what can happen when you supplement with redox signaling molecules. Now, maybe there was another reason for why this woman had these improvements, but I think you can see the changes in this woman starting at age 84 when she started supplementing all the way up to 92. You can see that she really looks like she's much younger at 92 than at 84. She looks like she feels much younger and healthier at 92 than she did at 84. And in fact, I know that indeed she does. So these are clearly in the realm of anti-aging, but they're naturally simply through supplementing with a group of molecules that our cells know exactly what to do to keep our cells functioning as though we were significantly younger. Let's look at some other pictures of what redox signaling can do, both topically and with drinking these molecules. I think it's clear in these before and after pictures that the manifestations of skin health are pretty darn obvious with the application of redox signaling molecules. And they're not just helping your skin to look younger, they're helping your skin to be at a functional level of being much younger. Scars that are melting away, age spots that are disappearing. It's hard to argue with the anti-aging benefits of providing our body with a healthy redox signaling environment. I'm not going to dwell on those, but in addition to great before and after pictures, we also have clinical trials that were done on our topical product, Renew 28, showing a reduction in things like wrinkle depth and smoothness, improvement in smoothness, and improvement in skin elasticity and moisture. All of these things are what are happening that give us those great after pictures when people provide extra redox signaling molecules to their skin. And what we find is that the topical application works much better when also supplementing with the liquid to give our bodies a full body exposure to an additional source of redox signaling molecules. I feel, based on what I know about Asea Redox, that this is the most powerful anti-aging discovery of our lifetime. The role of redox signaling molecules and the loss of those molecules in the development of age-related problems is a huge development and a huge area of understanding that can help us to minimize the effects of aging. The long-term consequences of that could very well be to bring down the costs of healthcare, which is a huge expense for the elderly. Aging and chronic inflammation, many of the problems that the older people suffer from are due to chronic inflammation. And it's a new branch of age-related research into the immunosenescence that happens with aging. Remember, we talked about one of the things that the gene study showed us was that innate immunity was benefited in that, was one of the 5 areas that showed benefit. But chronic low-grade inflammation is a highly significant risk factor for morbidity and mortality in older patients. And that is driven to a great extent by an imbalance and a failure of a healthy redox signaling system. All are associated with decreases in redox signaling molecules and a decline in redox efficiency. Don't take my word for it. Here we have some articles pulled from PubMed: oxidative stress in chronic lung disease, mitochondrial dysfunction, and dysregulation of redox signaling. Reactive oxygen species inflammation and lung damage. Aging impairs cellular communication. There is no doubt about that. I just got a text from Nancy. I hope there's not a problem with the slideshow. Anyway, aging decreases our ability to control all this biochemistry. It decreases our epigenetic signaling, decreases our ability to repair cellular damage. It decreases our ability to replace severely damaged cells. It decreases our level of autophagy, which is getting rid of toxins, and it decreases our immune protection. These are not things that you want to happen if you can help your cells to minimize those problems. Here's an article: redox signaling in neurotransmission and cognition in aging. Remember that I mentioned that they can see changes in brains 10 years before the development of dementia. Reactive oxygen species mediating signaling in the aging. Redox biology and neurologic function, dysfunction, and aging. Redox signaling in skeletal muscle. Redox signaling, neuroinflammation, and neurodegeneration. Cellular aging, is it inevitable? Well, I'll let you answer that question. Could specific nutritional ingredients acting through redox-sensitive pathways influence cell performance to help counteract the effects of cellular aging? I think it can, and I think we're on the forefront of that with this supplement. Asea has recently come up with some new areas of supplementation that can improve our redox environment. These are focused on certain things like mental clarity, increased energy, and changes in our mood, decreasing excitability. We also have a great skincare system that is designed to counteract the effects of aging on skin, photoaging, all of that sort of thing that causes our skin health to decline with age. Important conclusion: knowing what we now know about redox, we can better appreciate the many problems that develop in the absence of redox homeostasis. We can better understand that problems with redox cell signaling are a major cause of, if not the major cause of many chronic illnesses. We can now appreciate the huge array of potential benefits available for redox signaling molecules and bioreplenishment with Asea Redox. Redox supplementation is obviously not just for the sick and old, but the sick and old can get really enhanced benefits. And I've seen that during my roughly 9 years with Asea. We just need to understand how important this is. The science behind redox is robust. There are thousands of peer-reviewed studies and information on PubMed about the role of redox in health. And I would strongly suggest that if you're interested, that you explore that. But again, you do not need to know all that we've talked about today in order to recommend redox. You just need to know that it helps, that it's totally non-toxic. Anybody can use it. It's the safest recommendation that you will make as a health professional. And if you want more information, again, these are places where you can go to gain more information on redox, on Asea Redox, and the whole topic of cellular health. You can also, I would suggest this book, if you want to just short circuit that and concentrate on how Asea works and a scientific perspective of that. So thank you very much.